Hello, good evening and welcome ladies and gentlemen to another round of epic racing action in the one and only series you all know and love. It's the UKSimRacing GT3 Championship as hosted by SimRacing International and brought to you on the premier sim racing platform available only on PC, known as iRacing. That's right, we continue the racing action tonight and we are back with a bang with round number 5 of season 16 of the championship that continues to ask the question, who on a Sunday evening is the master or mistress of the GT3 class racing machine? And here today we conclude the first half of the championship campaign with a visit to Germany and with it a visit to the redesigned Hermann Tilke Hockenheimring Baden-Württemberg Grand Prix circuit. A far cry from the original circuit which saw drivers roar the way into local forestry, this circuit unleashed onto the world in 2002 was all aimed at improving the spectator's view, but at the same time as well improving the safety of motorsport. With the run into the forest normally seeing drivers extend to the best part, depending on their choice of machinery, of the best part of 160 to 200 miles per hour, particularly if they were Formula 1 machines. It was decided on the safety grounds that the circuit will be shortened, it will be turned into a much more technical circuit, and with it gives spectators the opportunity to see all the racing from the grandstands, and drivers the opportunity to see plenty more corners rather than straight, and also the opportunities to get home safely just as quickly as they can get to the checker flag. But where are my manners? Allow me to welcome you all to this live broadcast, albeit post-round from circuit side, and you're tuning in right now via the SimRacing International YouTube channel. Indeed, if you go to youtube.com and search for SRI or SimRacing International, you can be tuning in there, the one and only source to be tuning in, and you can be joining in a good number of individuals, including first and foremost there, none other than Anstis Races or Nathan Anstis. And good evening to you, Nathan. I hope you're doing well. And you asked the question, am I feeling better? I'm mostly over what was suspected COVID-19 or some sort of flu or cold, albeit it's not quite gone yet, and therefore my voice might give way all the way through the broadcast. How I'm going to do is my best to make sure it's not going to give away. I'm pumped full of medication, pumped full of excitement and adrenaline, and that's exactly what we need to make sure that we can get through the entirety of our racing today. And thank you for asking. And well, ladies and gentlemen, what have we got on our schedule for today? Well, we've got one race on our schedule of tours, times in Greenwich Mean Time, that's GMT, or Universal Coordinate Time +1. Well, in fact, Universal Coordinate Time, not the +1 there. I'm still stuck in British summertime, goodness me. But in UTC as well, what we can see there, it is approximately 5.5 minutes time. We're making our way to the grid for our one and only 60-minute race. And that will be our feature race to wrap up the first half of the season. And there won't be any mid-season break, of course. We run right into the second half, but it will feel like it's a milestone and it is a checkpoint for many of our drivers, and our championship standings after 4 rounds so far prove to be quite in the balance depending on the class, and could we see things shuffled around today, it depends on who is able to pass their technical test with flying colours. But just to remind you, of course, the race that actually we're going to be seeing is not live. It actually occurred earlier on what was Sunday the 26th of October 2025. We're bringing it to you as if it were live this fine Wednesday evening on the 29th of October, and we do not know here in the commentary booth who comes away victorious, who even takes pole position in the qualifying session that's currently ongoing. And in the commentary booth you have myself. My name is Paul Walsh, also known as TX11 or Britain a Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. Now we're bringing you all your racing action as it unfolds over the entirety of the season. But speaking of the season then, let's give you a recap of how far we've come and what we've still got lying in wait, and start off with our calendar, of course. And as we can see, we are right at the end of the first half of the season. Last time out, it was the Indianapolis Motor Speedway in the United States of America for round number 4 that kept us entertained throughout an entire 60-minute blockbuster, and up and down the field there. We saw surprises, we saw plenty of racing action, and we saw 4 names to the top step. For Joe Nathan in Elite, it was back-to-back victories, and he was able to gradually outpace Richard Simnor over the distance. In the Pro class, Halsoy had a very close run-in with Mikey Storey, but in the end was able to hold on and therefore take his first win of the season. In the Premier class, it was John Watt who took the victory, but there's more about that very shortly, because there was a quite important stewarding decision that came out after the race with regards to John Watt's victory after his major contact with Ricardo Luis Pereira midway through the race. And then we, of course, did have Thomas Weston finally securing his first win of the season, the 4th attempt to try, and despite having race-leading pace for the first 3 rounds, he finally got it done in round number 4, and therefore he'll be feeling as though now's an opportunity to make it back-to-back victories. But after today, we'll be making our way to Sebring International Raceway, and on the 2nd of November, that's where we'll continue the story with the start of the second half of the season in round number 6. But as for our standings then, we'll recap who the winners were from round number 4, but who exactly sits where in the standings after 4 rounds. Starting off with your Elite Drivers' Championship, and as we can see here, Joe Nathan with back-to-back wins for Rage Against the Game Esports, he now holds a lead of 10 points over DCW Race's Richard Simnor, who has yet to score a win, but has scored at 3 second places to Nathan's 2 wins and 2 third places. And the reason the gap's not bigger is because the drop score is being accounted for at this point, and those drop scores will add up over the course of the season. These two are breaking away, with Ryan Davis at Empire Motorsport sitting in 3rd right now and hoping he can get a bit closer. However, he'll want to continue to add to his podium tally, if not a win. If he doesn't, Casper Brotner will be right there behind him, only a further 20 points adrift in 4th place at Old Dudes in Cars, with Andy Jones there for DCW Racing. Not on the grid last time out Indianapolis, but we hope to see him again today, and the Welshman there will be hoping that he can try and channel a bit of the pace of his teammate in the Ford Mustang of Simnor, because if not, then only 22 points behind is Helder Gonzalez of Tractix Racing, and Gonzalez right now has had a mixture of results so far, and that non-finish feeling like a gut punch last time out Indianapolis when he was looking so quick, but unfortunately ended up in the barrier and in the grass before he could really get things to the pass. And then we saw Philip Schwerker, well, he's yet to be back on the grid after the opening 2 rounds. The Venari Racing driver sits in 7th, head of Yavi Sierra, with Jacko Taylor and Ulrich Scholl completing your top 10, and outside the top 10 completing your top 12 for the Elite class, it's Joe Newman for Empire Motorsport and Raz Harper for DDK Racing Team, who has yet to score any points, unfortunately, due to plenty of misfortune along the way. As for the Pro class, we can see Mikey Storey is still the man to beat, even if he was beaten by Krista Halsoy last time out. 20 points is the gap, but Storey has 2 wins to Halsoy's 1. And also, he does have that 2nd place and an 8th place, whereas Halsoy is more consistent on the podium, it could be said. With a 1st, a 2nd, and a 3rd, he's visited all 3 steps, something that Mikey Storey has not got in his stamp book so far. But the battle between the Dexterous Motorsports and Tractix Racing drivers is intensifying, and Si Anthony, meanwhile, in 3rd place for UKSimRacing Prix, was yet to be able to recreate his arrival on the podium since the season opener, but he'll be hoping to be back on the podium today. But it is getting very close there in the fight for 3rd, with Christian Furs there for Fantaspect Motorsport sits in 4th place at 212 points, so only the best part there of what is 16 behind Anthony, and only 4 ahead of Nathan Scott, who right now would love to get some consistency on the board for Empire Motorsport, given that race win in the season opener, but right now is yet to be able to recreate it. Christian Maltrek sits in 6th place for America MA70 Esports, who were non-finished last time out, and therefore he falls to 6th, and is only 12 points ahead of Darren Sharples, with the Old Dudes in Cars Blue Mercedes driver then being followed up by Ivan Sander for Pegasus SimRacing, and then Jack Barker, who wasn't on the grid last time out. However, he'll be looking to continue that momentum of that podium all the way back in Spain, and the Maiden for Racing driver there will be followed up by Nathan Anstis, his long-term rival. They're equal on points and very different results between the two of them. From the UKSimRacing Mansell drivers, then Peter Cox and Giles Philippets, who complete your top 12 in Pro. As for the Premier class, here we can see it's Samuel Clark who leads with 2 wins, a 3rd and a 2nd. Not necessarily in the correct order there in terms of results, but in the right order right now is how he stands in the championship. He is ahead of Hendrik Zilke by always the best part there, 38 points, with the Dexterous Motorsports driver right now really the man to beat. The old dudes in cars blue driver, meanwhile, would love to make it onto the top step of the podium, or at least have another visit to the podium, because Ricardo Luis Pereira there sits in third. Now, we should point out that these standings were before the penalties were applied, and indeed any post-race judiciary was applied at the end of round number 4, and the SRI Privateers of the Caribbean driver, in his huge instance, of course, with John Watt, well, what may have been the winner on the road, if you will. However, after the shooting verdicts were taken, Ricardo Luis Pereira was promoted to victory, with John Watt receiving a 10-second post-race time penalty. So therefore, that second place will be upgraded to a win when we look at the standings come next round. So you'll see his points get a significant boost. Alan Lever sits in fourth place for UKSimRacing Mansell, and on 214 points there right now, he finds himself falling away from the top 3, but he's in close company there with Richard Jones only 2 points behind. The Silent Steady Racing driver there then has been followed up by John Watt, and as we can see the win there at the moment, but that will be demoted, I believe, to a third place for the 10-second post-race time penalty, and therefore the SRI Saving Privateer Ryan driver knows he's got a lot of work to do today if he wants to get back on fine form, and on that top step, he's ahead of Austin Graff at Axis Simsports, with Daniel Pays in 8th place at Old Dudes in Cars, and then Joe Sparrow sits in 9th for GT3 Motorsports, ahead of Luke Sherlock, who completes your top 10, and outside the top 10, let's not forget about Wayne Douglas, nor Rob Winslow, who complete your top 12. In the Evo class, well, it's Edward Berry, who has yet to be able to make it another win. Indeed, wins seem to be going to everybody right now in the Evo class, because we do have a whole multitude of winners, and 4 of your top 5 are race winners so far. But Berry is the man to beat, and he's 24 points ahead of Simon Hartley, with the UKSimRacing Hill driver having the most consistent runner results. However, do not forget the DWR with SimCoach Setups driver, who arguably having missed round number 2, is just as consistent almost there as Berry, albeit the 5th place holds him back to a degree. Jordan Jones, he's looking increasingly strong behind his teammate there on 242 points, 14 adrift, and only 4 ahead of the man who took the win in Spain. Joel Loudon there for SimRacing International, Saving Privateer Brian, with Thomas Weston with that first win finally leaping into the top 5, and that win very important to home missed the season opener, and therefore those 22 points right now will feel as though they could be a lot higher if he's able to match up with another result today. Richard White is only 12 points behind for UKSimRacing Mansell, but he's ahead of Max Galgay by 16 points there for Split Strat Esports, and it's Joseph Preston for GT3 Motorsports ahead of Daryl Giacovelli and Carl Tivoli, who complete your Evo top 10, and to complete the top 12 it's Sloan Steady Racing's Alex Brown and Paul Maffey for Phoenix Racing. As the Teams Championship, very quickly, what we can see here is that it's Dexterous Motorsports at 708 points, and they are starting to tear away at the very top, ahead of Old Dudes in Cars Blue. And can anybody slow the Dexterous Motorsport team down? Well, indeed, their dexterity has proven to be very strong thus far, and well, if they can keep this up and keep the consistency, it may be very difficult to beat them come the midpoint or indeed the end of the season. But Old Dudes in Cars Blue, they lead the rest of the field along right now, and the battle for second could be really the centre point at this point in time, with UKSimRacing Mansell only the best part there of what is 32 points behind, and it's a further 2 to DCW Racing and a further 22 to Tractix Racing. However, from the 502 points of the 5th place team, it's then 498 points for DWR with SimCoach Setups, who are really starting to build some great momentum in the Teams Championship. They're only 4 ahead of SRI Saving Privateer Ryan, and then finally you do have a sizable gap to 8th, 9th and 10th, with the 3 teams there separated by only the best part of 26 points. It's Old Dudes in Cars ahead of Empire Motorsport, with UKSimRacing Hill completing your top 10 in the Teams Championship. And we've got plenty of teams nipping at the heels of the top 10 and wanting to break the way back in again. But as for our circuit for today then, we are here at the Am Motortrom in the Hockenheim region of the state of Baden-Württemberg in Germany, for none other than the Grand Prix layout of the Hockenheimring Baden-Württemberg. 16 corners, 2.84 miles in length, and a big thank you to iRacing.com, not just for their brilliant simulator, but the fantastic track map. Very little elevation change at this circuit, so a 2-dimensional image practically sums it up very well in terms of the layout and the amount of elevation, and what we see in lacking in elevation is made up for in corner variety and also several strengths of varying lengths. But in terms of the main straights, it's the start-finish straight, and also the run out of Nord Curve to Einfurt Parabolica at turns 1 through to 2, and also the run all the way out of Einfurt Parabolica to the Spitzerkehre hairpin at turn number 6, after which we see the straight shorten and the corners come thick and fast, and we see it devolve into medium to low-speed apexes with Mercedes Arena at turns 7 through to 10, and the much slower section of the stadium run from Mobile 1 Curve at turn number 11 all the way through to Sud Curve at turn number 16. If there's not a type of corner here that our drivers are not used to, then they won't be passing that test because they need to be absolutely on the ball here at the Hockenheimring. As our rules, before we go racing, this is an open setup series with fuel loads restricted to 60% for all races. Qualifying-wise, a closed qualifying format shall be used. In fact, it's just been completed for this round, with drivers having 4 flying laps available to them. And as for the race, it shall commence via a double-file rolling start, as is the tradition of the UKSimRacing GT3 Championship, with there being 1 mandatory pit stop available for fuel, and changing tyres is entirely optional. Each driver has 1 fast repair as well, with a driver receiving a drive-through penalty if they accumulate 20 more instant points. That's the only other time we'll see them come into the pit lane, unless they picked up a penalty, of which we do have a drive-through penalty which must be served today for Helder Gonzalez for a jump start at Indianapolis. He must serve that at some point in the race, and all race stewarding shall be conducted post-race. But without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's make our way back to circuit side, and as we do, well, our drivers are making their way onto the grid, and well, as they do, this is how they'll line up for round number 5 of the SimRacing International hosted UKSimRacing GT3 Championship Season 16. And as we can see, it is Richard Simnor who lines up on pole position this time out, finally taking that pole position once again for DCW Racing ahead of Relentless Racing's newcomer to the grid, and that's Ashley Coupland, and we look forward to seeing what the Briton could do, given the fact he's reckoned to be an absolute force on this grid. We'll then see behind them, starting in 3rd place, Joe Nathan for Rage Against the Game Esports, having a bit of a difficult qualifying session. In fact, the first time we've seen him really qualify far away from that top step, in the fact he was almost 3/10 off of the time set by Simnor, and indeed Coupland a lot closer by comparison. We then do see your pro pole sitter of site anti-start full for UKSimRacing Prix, his best qualifying performance of the season in the 227. He was ahead of Mikey Storey for Dexterous Motorsports by the best part of half a tenth. With then, you do have your premier pole sitter. He's all fired up after Indianapolis. You can see him there underneath the grid. That is Ricardo Luis Pereira for SRI Privateers of the Caribbean. And the Portuguese driver then be followed up by the combination of the pro pair of none other than Krista Halsoy and what is none other than Christian Furs, the Panda Spec Motorsports driver, who I typically refer to as Colin Furs in reference to a YouTuber. Well, I've got it right this time, and I haven't referred to him as Colin so far. We then do see Peter Cox starting in 9th place for Slow and Steady Racing, ahead of Casper Rotner, the 4th place elite driver. And then outside the top 10, it is going to be starting in 11th place, Alan Lever for UKSimRacing Mansell, ahead of Hendrik Zilka for Old Dudes in Cars Blue. Both drivers are having a decent qualifying performance, it must be said, but not able to hold a candle to Luis Pereira in the Premier class. But they were able to beat the 2 pros of Christian Maltrek for Miraca MA70 Esports and Nathan Anstis for UKSimRacing Mansell. But intriguingly, if there's Anstis, there's Barker, and between the 2 of them is Wayne Douglas, the privateer, with a better qualifying performance, full for the Premiers, and then there is the made for racing driver of Jack Barker starting in 16th place. We have Darren Sharples just behind it in 17th, and that's where we make a whole second from pole all the way to 17th, with the Old Dudes in Cars Blue driver then being followed up by your Evo pole sitter. Well done to him, Thomas Weston, absolutely on fire there, the best of the Evos by a considerable margin. Yavi Sierra starts in 19th place, ahead of Stephen Donnelly for Jazz Team Motorsports, who completes your top 20. Outside that top 20, we do have Rob Windsor for UKSimRacing Hill, ahead of 2nd place starter in Evo. That's DWR with Supercoach Setups Julian Jones. Well, in fact, that's not Julian Jones, that's Jordan Jones there. Let me get his name right this time. With Samuel Clark started 23rd for Dexterous Motorsports at a struggling qualified session, but ahead of newcomer to the grid, Ross Young. And then we do have James Colley started 25th for UKSimRacing The Hill, ahead of Richard Jones of Slow and Steady Racing. With Joe Sparrow started 27th for JSD Motorsports, ahead of Luke Sherlock, who'll be hoping for a much better day in the office day after the frustrations of Indianapolis. And then round off your top 30, it will be the Evo pair of none other than Edward Berry and also Simon Hartley, with Berry having a difficult qualifying session and Hartley starting from the pit lane. Outside the top 30 then, Paul Maffey lines up 31st for Phoenix Racing, ahead of Dexterous Motorsports' Matt Hoyland, who struggles in qualifying, it would seem, today. And then we do have Joseph Preston 33rd for JSD Motorsports, and none other than Daryl Giacomelli started last but not least 34th on the grid. So 34 starters. Who's going to come away victorious, ladies and gentlemen? Well, we are not too far away from finding out whatsoever, as the field gradually bustles its way around behind the safety car there. Some gravel absolutely being sent left, right and centre. Well, very shortly it's going to be to Richard Simnor to take us for 60 minutes of racing here at the Hockenheimring in Germany for round number 5 of the UKSimRacing GT3 Championship Season 16. And And it's go, go, go for all the drivers here as time ticks away. And Richard Simnor leads them down towards turn 1. Ashley Coupland looks on the outside. Joe Nathan immediately on the inside there. Contact with Coupland. They both survive it, but Coupland can't get it back together. Car slides. Everyone takes the base action immediately, looking left, right, and centre. And they, oh no! And that, no, surely that's not Luke Sherlock. It is. Sherlock makes contact with Coupland. And Indianapolis fever strikes again for Luke Sherlock. He can't get a lucky break. But meanwhile, whilst all that happens, further up the road, we've got plenty happening as well. Let's not forget about it. Everyone else is safely through turns 2 and 3 and 4. And as they make the way downwards towards turn number 6, well, right now, Peter Cox battling side by side with Christian Furs. And then Ricardo Luis Pera trying to hold on just in front of them. But into the heavy braking zone they go. Some moves being made there. Site Anti trying to take a cheeky peek, but can't quite make it happen. We see plenty of 2 wides on entry. Samuel Clark as well, under some pressure to try and pass Nathan Anstis. But it's Nathan Anstis who goes around the outside of him instead. So Anstis gets that move done very nicely indeed. Moves up into 15th place overall. And they roar their way now in towards turn number 8 here. Will we see any more deft moves? Well, we see Yavi Sierra. He's in the, what is the very fluorescent Mercedes being caught up there. So that's a bit of a stack up. With Joe Sparrow there struggling under braking in towards turn number 8. I think missing his braking marker and having to stop the car dead on the dime. And Jack Bark having to wait his turn as a result. But behind them, Ross Young on his debut in a very colourful McLaren 720S Evo. Well, right now, the British driver here defending versus Stephen Donnelly in the Haribo Ford Mustang. And it does seem as though that Ford Mustang right now, as much as it's sweet, well, it's definitely not quite being able to placate the diets, or indeed, well, it is the gumption of every car in front, and therefore it is not able to make its way further through. But meanwhile, Rob Wins are under pressure here from Sparrow as they make the way through turn 15 to 16. And as they come flying through that right-hander, it does seem as though right now Jack Barker queuing up behind this and fancying his chances. Alan Leather, meanwhile, under a bit of pressure here from Christian Maltrek. Maltrek tries to put his nose up the inside into Nord Curve. Can't quite find it, but Wayne Douglas now looks one way, then the other. He looks the other way again. So does Casper Brockner. Right now they're weaving while they're driving a straight line. That's very late under braking there for Brockner. And he rubs the side of Christian Maltrek, and he does go around the outside of Wayne Douglas. And Douglas loses it on the apex curve there. And turn number 4, bumper taken off, Cole gets caught up, and that is, I believe, Nathan Anstis having to park the car. Jack Barker takes the rallycross line, as does one of the UKSimRacing Hill Green machines. And, well, Douglas does bring it back on it again, but very tentatively, it's absolute pandemonium. But whilst it's pandemonium there, coming out of turn number 4, my goodness, it's pandemonium at the front of the pro field, because that is Mikey Storey having just dived up the inside of Site Anthony to take the lead of the pro class. It's all happening very quickly here, and Site Anthony trying to come back at him immediately, but can't quite find it. It's turn number 8, I think. Anthony right now is going to have to wait his turn, but the chaos that we saw behind, well, that has done is created a split in the field. The top 11 now walking away, and then 12th place man Thomas Weston leads the rest of that pack, albeit he doesn't as soon as he makes a mistake there in turn number 8 and releases Samuel Clark through, albeit he has got the best part of what is 10 places when he treated himself a next Evo driver of Jordan Jones. So therefore right now for Weston, he can afford to lose a few of these places. He doesn't need to hold on to them, and that would be a little bit greedy perhaps. He'll want to try and hold on to them, of course, but I think his mindset has gradually evolved into what's the need to, as that's what's the need to make contact there. Rob Wins are being tapped on the rear by Yavi Sierra. I think it was a light contact, but unfortunately due to the angle of approach plus also the nature of the camber at turn number 13, it's a much more pronounced incident, and unfortunately we have seen Rob Windsor ejected to the gravel there, but thankfully as it's not raining, he's going to be able to bring it back on. As meanwhile, that's a big slide loose there for James Connolly as he comes out of the final bend, and as he brings it back together, that's going to cost him a lot of speed. Ross Young tries to go around the outside into Nord Curve. That's brave from Young. Connolly gives him a bit of a rub, but gives the space, and then looking between the turbines Nathan Anstis, but in the end he can't quite find it through. Can the light blue UKSimRacing machine? He has to wait. Young versus Connolly. Now switches back the other way. Connolly back up the inside into 2, 3, and then around the outside of 4. And, well, Young is still there with him. So right now, Ross Young may be new to this grid, but he's fighting one of the veterans here, and he's showing no signs of being daunted by the fact that what is James Connolly has the best part, I do believe, of at least 10 seasons of the GT3 Championship under his belt, let alone a single race. For Ross Young, he'll be getting his first race on the board after this one. He's raced in plenty of GT3 Championships elsewhere, and also at SimRacing International Thursdays. But right now for Ross Young, this is his first steps into what is the Sunday series, and he's getting right stuck in here, which is what we love to see. Still fighting as they go side by side through 7 into 8, and, well, Connolly goes defensive and tries to say to him, can you politely go away? And I think Young's saying, no, I want to play a little bit more. But Nathan Anstis and Stephen Donnelly here are close together. We jump on board with Donnelly in the Ford Mustang that looks very amiss compared to its peers around it. However, he has now got a little bit of American support in the form of Matt Hoyland's Ford Mustang as well. Hoyland Taylor for the United Kingdom, but his machine very much from stateside. And right now, the Irishman of Donnelly, well, we're looking very quick through there, coming out to turn number 12. My good lord, this Mustang gets the launch. However, under braking, that's where it lacks by comparison. It does not have the braking potential whatsoever. And Stephen Donnelly right now just having to get back in the queue and hope that he can find a way to pick his way up through a little bit later on. But they weave their way through Sud Curve, and that completes another lap for these drivers, and with it, it completes the opening 5 minutes of the racing, and it's a good time perhaps for us to take a look back at some of the chaos that we saw right at the start of the race. And many will be wondering, well, what exactly happened at the start? Well, here we go, ladies and gentlemen, to take a trip back in time and tell you a little bit of the start, indeed all the madness, but not before we do see a move there being made by Nathan Anstis up the inside of Ross Young. Does he get it? No, he doesn't, and therefore let's take a trip back in time then and get a replay. So our first replay then is from the race start, and we're going to be looking in particular at what happened to Ashley Coupland. Now, as he got his way underway, it was Richard Simnor who dictated the pace. They roared the way down towards turn number 1. Joe Nathan got the better start from the second row of the grid, but as they turned the way into Nord Curve, tapped the inside there, survived it initially, but there as he tried to get the power back down, rear tyre spun back up, the whole field split around him, did very well to the field, and then unfortunately Luke Sherlock did not take the right evasive action and ended up paying the price for it. But then, as all the drivers made their way through turns 2, 3 and 4, well, it was mostly clean from everybody involved straight away, so some absolutely great battles and exchanges, and everyone safely on through the opening couple of quarters, minus Coupland and Sherlock. We then had some further changes. This was on lap number 2. This was Hendrik Zilke. End up in a bit of drama. Indeed, many end up in drama because this was Wayne Douglas going very sideways coming out of turn number 4, and everyone having to take evasive action. And in the end, well, Zilke was able to take the Dodge. The old dudes in cars Mercedes with him was not. The whole field spread out there. It was absolute chaos. And whilst it was chaos for them, it was also excitement for Mikey Storey down at the Spitzkehrer hairpin, because this was Storey a little bit further up the road from Wayne Douglas getting it all sorts of wrong. You'll see that in the rear of the picture potentially, but he was up the inside there, Cy Anthony, to take the place very quickly indeed. So Storey wasting no time moving into the lead of the class. We also had this on lap number 2. This was for Darren Sharples. I believe he was the man who lost his front bumper in that contact with Wayne Douglas. And in the end, the car making its way out to the hairpin, but the damage to it and the suspension, oh no, that's got rolled there. And that was Daryl Giacovelli he collected on the side of. So Daryl Giacovelli, they'll be a bit frustrated at that damage. That may require them both to come into the pits, in fact. But from that, we also had this happen to Paul Maffey on lap number 3. And this was Maffey being chased down at the time by, I believe, Simon Hartley. Hartley couldn't find a way on the inside, but Maffey makes way into the hairpin, gets it rolled, bit too much speed, and Hartley does a very good job there of reacting in the nick of time. So that explains all the madness of the opening couple of laps, at least some of it. Let's make your way back to your live racing, ladies and gentlemen, and see how the story continues. So as we come on back, plenty more racing to come here at the Hockenheimring, and right now, well, if that was the opening 3 laps and some of the major highlights on those opening 3 laps, we've got plenty more to come. But right now, for Richard Simnor, there's plenty more to come from him as well, and the fact that he does hold a 1.7 second gap at the moment over Joe Nathan. And the story of these two over the season has been that Richard Simnor has typically been on the same pace as Nathan, but the Ford Mustang over the distance on strategy has struggled a little bit. One of the things we do know about the balance of performance is that the Ford Mustang is a very thirsty car compared to the Ferrari that chases it right now, and therefore it does typically use a little bit more fuel. On top of that, it does mean normally the pit stop is longer unless it can do a lot of fuel saving, and Joe Nathan, by comparison, well, the Rage Against the Game esports driver, can really just find a way then to fuel save, and that's how he's been able to take the wins strategically. He's just been the smarter of the two of them and made sure that fuel tank has worked out to his advantage. Now, we do say hello to a couple more of you in the YouTube chat, including none other than Sam Clark there, and indeed, don't be shy, folks. Feel free to say hi if you desire. I appreciate you may be transfixed to your screens right now with all the racing that's going on, and, well, plenty of racing going on in the Pro class, because Mikey Storey has stepped out of this battle as a slight anti, but Christian Furs and Krista Halsoy, it's the battle of the two drivers with names that begin with Chris. Well, right now, who's going to christen this third place at the end of this one? We'll have to see. Furs does seem to be a bit in control at the moment. He did take the place off of Halsoy right at the start of the race, but right now you can definitely see how they're very close, and there's Anthony and what is Storey in the bottom of the picture, and well, they've just made their way through the foreground, and therefore our top two are fighting, and our battle for third is absolutely reaching fever pitch. But they also do have Ricardo Luis Pereira, the Premier leader, following on through with Christian Maltrek and Peter Cox for close company. So he right now is the fly in the ointment here for all these pro drivers, but he'll be very happy to be because it keeps him safe, albeit not if he makes a mistake like that. The car wobbling under entry there, trying to get it to turn in, and in the end a lot of understeer on entry towards turn number 15, and well, that is not expected from that Aston Martin, and Luis Pereira will need to look at that and potentially dial that out, because if he can't, that is a sign of worse to come. Well, the car does not want to respond, and well, driver and machine are not in harmony, and after that it normally means a mistake is on its way. Looking a bit further down in the Premier order to another Aston Martin, what we do see here, none other than what is Joe Sparrow, and he's chasing down Samuel Clark. And how about this? Samuel Clark, he may not have won at Indianapolis, he wasn't the best on pace, but he was highly consistent. But here today, really looking vulnerable compared to the opening 4 rounds, as we see Sparrow there flashing his lights on full absolute beam intensity, trying to get into the head of Clark. And well, Clark not falling for it at the moment, but definitely at risk of falling down the order here. And that's not to belittle the man. We've normally seen him been on fine form, but here at the moment it would seem, well, the Hockenheimring even doesn't favour him, or all his rivals have caught up. And we look back from the rear of this McLaren, and well, that Aston Martin getting very close. Going to look to the inside here into turn number 7. Into the right-hand kink they go. Too wide they enter. They can go too wide to turn number 8, but somebody's going to have to give way eventually, surely. Sparrow's trying to go around the outside. The JSD Aston Martin's got plenty of grip in the medium speed approach, and as he makes way through, it's a lovely run. Too wide still here. Clark holding onto his metal as they make their way past our static camera. Gives you a sense of the speed they carry past the camera, and in towards turn number 11. Well, Samuel Clark does hold on. Sparrow in the end does back off. It's brilliant fighting, however, and I would be surprised if we see more of that in short order. But speaking of things that are coming up shortly, well, Jordan Jones, right now second place of your Evo driver. He's very keen to get past James Connolly, who is your 7th place Premier driver. And the reason being because he does have a JST Motorsports Porsche of Joseph Preston right behind. And Preston here is on a mission to try and make his way through. Will he be able to do so? And the answer is not currently, at least. However, Preston's starting to look faster and faster, and ever since Indianapolis, he has now started to be on the front foot a little bit in terms of pace, which is absolutely brilliant for Joseph, and that's what we love to see. But as he comes on through, do look back up the order, and in particular we look to Matt Hoyland, and here he is in the Vulcan Fasters machine, and well, he does, or Moyland as he's known in the YouTube chat, good evening to you good sir, he says, does my Mustang front end look as ugly as it felt? And the answer is there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I do want to say that Ford Mustang has definitely been bruised and beaten, but it's not broken yet, unless those white stripes down the side of the car are essentially where they put plasters and tape around the car to keep it together. But this Ford Mustang right now definitely soldier on as much as possible. The white lines there, they're not Adidas stripes, they're part of the livery, and they're definitely not plasters or stitching on the car either. That front left bumper is absolutely bruised for that 223, and I suspect right now that for Matt, he might be battling against what is a car that doesn't want to turn through right-handers at all, and it may want to overturn through left-handers by comparison, which is normally a sign of significant suspension and front bumper damage. Comes out, no signs of any weakness at the moment. He's keeping it together, and he wants to try and get to that pit lane, of course, as part of his normal strategy, so that way he doesn't have to make a double stop, and then he can utilise what would be the fast repair available. As Moyland says to us there in the YouTube chat, it's in its bulldog face phase, and indeed right now it's not a puck, it's a bulldog. It's an American bulldog at full tilt. But as we do look back up the order, well, Chris Halsoy has bolted away from his fellow Aston Martin of Luis Pereira, and right now Ricardo Luis Pereira, Premier leader. He doesn't need to keep these pros behind him. He's working hard to try and manage his race, but Christian Maltrek looking all the way around the outside in the Miracle livery machine. Indeed, I'm getting channels there of what is the number 32 from Team WRT in the GT World Challenge Championship. I don't know if that's been used as inspiration, but it's a lovely livery on that car, must be said. The car, we'll see it on the screen there, and right now Christian Maltrek making a smooth move up the inside. Peter Cox tries to do the same then, the slow and steady racing Mercedes. He does so, and Ricardo Luis Pereira does not fight it too hard. He knows that he doesn't need to fight these guys, and I think his game plan is just to maintain pace and make them do the hard work to go around him, albeit once they're alongside, he'll simply just lift off the throttle and say, right, you got me guys, and there comes Casper Brotner, absolutely brazen on the inside. And Brotner is there saying, well, Ricardo, if you're letting the pro drivers go, you can let an elite driver go as well. So Brotner being allowed to go through, and now Luis Pereira will have a 2.5 second gap The referee does get to Alan Lever, who you just saw coming up behind in the rear of the picture. And Alan Lever in that Lamborghini is starting to look a little bit quicker, in fact, and I wouldn't be surprised here if we are seeing the Lamborghinis come on a bit stronger. We haven't got that many on the grid this season. Then we've got Alan Lever in the Premier class and we've got Jack Barker in the Pro class. But what we have seen so far is that once that Lamborghini gets up to temperature and to speed, as long as the driver can keep it pointed on the tarmac in the right direction, does seem to have a lot of race pace, particularly in the second stint. Many of you may remember in Spain, in round number 3, if it were not for the fact that we had to call time after 60 minutes of racing, if we had 2 more laps, Jack Barker was, of course, to catch the leaders and potentially win the race. But he didn't have enough time, and we was gutted about that when I spoke to him after the race. But he was very proud of the fact the Lamborghini really came alive for him, and he'd be hoping for more of that today. But looking back to the very front of the field, well, here's the man right now who's absolutely in control, it would seem, or at least he would appear to be in control this time. It's none other than what is Richard Simnor, and Simnor going onwards by the best part of 2.7 seconds over Joe Nathan. And Nathan right now in the Rage Against the Game esports machine, he's hoping to be close, but he's not quite close enough to be there with his target man. But then again, there's still some time in this race, there's a long time to go, and therefore he won't be too upset about that. Mikey Storey, meanwhile, we look back for the rear of the leading Pro BMW. The Dexterous Motorsports 214 is still being hunted non-stop here, no doubt about it. And well, the problem is going to be that St Anthony right now, well, that McLaren could save some fuel unless he's having to drive on the absolute limit to stay with Storey. Although I would say that Storey, in fact, is the one having to drive on the limit when he takes all that gravel coming out to turn number 11 in towards 12. Right now, St Anthony definitely mounted the pressure. This is the strongest we've seen from St Anthony all season so far. Take a bit of a different line there, opening up the exit at turn 15 to give himself more space for late apex at turn number 16. It's an obvious tactic. It offsets the dirty air at the cost of a little bit of front left tyre life, but he naturally gains a bit of life back as he runs out wide there for Nord Curve. He'll get away with that once or twice, but run out too wide, he'll pick up a slowdown and also track limit warnings. Or if he picks up another of those as instant points, it will be a drive-through penalty. But right now, not making any mistakes, it's staying right behind Storey. And St Anthony has typically gone well here at the Hockenheimring. I do remember all the way back in the previous season when it was a wet weather race where St Anthony was one of the quickest drivers out there in the wet conditions. A very treacherous race back then, but we've got brilliant sunshine here today. And as he tries to look around the outside, it's there, but he's going to go for it here. Storey definitely really struggling in these low-speed corners. That BMW is not looking comfortable at all. He's going to brake quite early. And Anthony right now seems to be a lot happier with the car. But what this is doing is it's bringing Christian Furs to play into this. And Krista Halsoy is only 1.5 seconds back. Christian Maltrek is only 1.7 seconds back. So they are all closing up here. This might be part of Storey's game plan, to be fair, which is to try and get all the pro drivers to condense together and then get them all to fight each other whilst he just gradually walks away with the lead. It's a risky tactic because, of course, the more drivers you queue up behind you, if you do make a mistake and you happen to be passed by one, you may be passed by the whole haul of them. The flip side of the coin is if you can get them all to fight each other, you'll very quickly open up a lovely gap, and by the time they've realised they shouldn't be fighting each other, they should be fighting you, it's far too late. We'll see whether that plan is going to play out for him successfully. As meanwhile, Jack Barker chases after Hendrik Zilke. Barker right now 7th of the pro drivers. He started 8th, so therefore he's gained 1 place in class. And in front of him is Zilke, the Premier driver. And Barker right now does need to close down the best part of 9 places if he wants to get onto the back of the top 6 pro pack. So we really do see 2 different sets of pro drivers at the moment. And Barker is leading the second pack, if you will, as he makes his way onto lap number 12 and gets closer to Zilke corner after corner. Speaking of Hendrik Zilke, he's had a bit of a quiet race at the moment, the old dudes in cars driver. To be fair to him, he has been highly consistent this season in that Mercedes-AMG Evo. I think he would fancy an opportunity to finish on the podium of Premier, but right now what he's doing is absolutely fine, which is holding on to 5th place, 6 seconds ahead of Ross Young, and conversely being behind Sparrow by the best part of 3 seconds. However, 3 seconds is quite attainable at this point in the race. It can be made on strategy, or it can be made on consistency or pace, so therefore I think he'll be sat there thinking to himself, you know what, we're on a good pace, let's not get too wound up at the moment. Meanwhile, one driver who's definitely trying to wind himself up for a move is Paul Maffey, the privateer here, chasing down Daryl Giacovelli. And right now the Phoenix Racing driver thinking of an opportunity here under braking in towards turn number 2, but it's going to open up even more because Giacovelli goes very deep. However, Maffey does not seize his opportunity for Phoenix Race and decides to simply wait behind. I think that was a wise move there because the way Giacovelli was coming back on, No, he's coming dangerously back onto the racing line. I think he was coming back with a mentality, which is I'm going to hold this position. And it gives Maffey now the opportunity to ride the slipstream all the way down to the hairpin. He goes for it. Oh, in does go Paul Maffey. Does he get it stopped? No, he doesn't. Misses braking zone by about 15 metres. Thankfully misses the tyre barrier, and with it brings himself back onto the racing circuit. But Daryl Giacovelli will hold on to that 5th place in the Evo class. So Maffey had the confidence, but unfortunately he over-expected the brakes, and therefore now he's got to do it all over again. But that's all part of the learning experience, and nobody needs to point and laugh at the man. Indeed, it'd be great to see him give it a go. That's how he can have fun. But meanwhile, as we do come back to the front of the Pro class, well, Mikey Storey right now still being chased down by Cy Anstey and Christian Furs, and Krista Halsoy is now right there with them. So suddenly what was a top 3 in Pro altogether is now a top 4 in Pro altogether. And here comes Christian Furs up the inside. That's very bold from Furs. That's going to work though. He moves into the lead of the Pro class, but now they all get on the rebound here to Storey and Anthony. Anthony's going to look to the inside, Storey's going to look to the outside, and for Christian Furs, he prevents the reverse Moses manoeuvre, or does he? When Mikey Storey pitches to the inside, so does Cy Anthony, and Furs finds himself all the way to the outside. He's given some space to operate here. Well, that's one way to go for the lead of a class. He does gain a place as Christian Furs. He gets out of Cy Anstey, but my good lord, that was a cent and a half. But sometimes, you know what, you've got to go for it. I think Storey and Anstey were so engrossed in fighting each other that they didn't expect the Ferrari driver to absolutely light the fuse and just toss the dynamite stick into the room. And well, after the initial explosion, there was all excitement, and Christian Furs does gain a place, but in return now Mikey Storey thinks to himself, okay, new man behind me, is he as good as Cy Anstey at staying behind me, or is he stronger or weaker? That's where the things will work out, because if Furs does not have the pace to stay as close as Cy Anstey was, Storey might be able to capitalise on this and start to open up a bit of a gap. Although with an attitude like that from Christian Furs, I wouldn't be surprised if he fancies his chances of chasing down Mikey Storey rather quickly, because you don't normally do that unless you think you can get to the front of that pack. But meanwhile, speaking of a driver trying to get to the head of a small pack, well, here is Joe Sparrow right now looking one way then the other, and Samuel Clark. Clark runs a little bit wide there, but make sure not to run too wide out of turn number 1. He'll pick up an off track for it, but no slowdown penalty. So Clark still holding on to 3rd place in Premier at the moment. But it's definitely not looking as though Clark has got the pace to catch up to Lever nor Luis Pereira. So here right now, I would imagine that Clark is really fighting for a 3rd place in this race and hoping that some lady luck brings the top 2 in Premier back to him. However, that's going to be easier said than done as they make their way down. And, well, Joe Sparrow right now looking up the inside, goes for it this time. Does he get it stopped? He does, just about. But he goes very aggressively under braking there, and unfortunately doesn't work out. And Yavi Sierra now closes up behind the pair, and the elite driver here, we ride aboard the front bumper. And well, right now he's thinking, okay, well, if they're going to start fighting each other like this, I might want to get ahead of them. The only thing is, we get a lovely view of the rear diffuser there of that Aston Martin, as Sierra doesn't seem to quite have the pace to pick his way past the mode. I think he is still required to play a bit of a patience game here. We will see how he can make that work a little bit later on, because he would like to get some overall spots. It might be more valuable, in fact, if he decides to come into the pits, he might be able to leapfrog them on strategy here, because we are getting closer and closer towards the pit window, which is normally somewhere in the region of about 20 minutes. We are in the pit window effectively, but the main pit window, it goes from 20 minutes to about 40 minutes of the race, or a little bit more condensed, it can be around the 25th minute completed, all the way through to approximately the 40th to 45th minute completed, depending on the track. But side-by-side battle here. Here comes Sparrow. Good exit altitude curve. Up the inside into Nord he goes. And Clark on the outside. And Clark there tries to hold it round. The rear of the car wobbles loose there under rotation, carrying a lot of speed. And, well, he does drop in behind Sparrow and has to go defensive there versus Sierra. Clark, however, goes all in there under brake. And he says, I want it back. And Sparrow says, you can't have it back. As Clark gets a little bit of power oversteer there. And as a result, falls back to 4th place. And as they build up the throttle, here's Sierra. Here's Weston. And right now the Evo leader's looking at this. And, well, Sierra definitely wants the places. Meanwhile, I would imagine that Weston's probably sat there thinking to himself, don't do it. Just let them fight. It's not worth it, given the fact you still have 9 places to the next Evo driver. But Sparrow going defensive here as they make the way out, and Clark finds himself under increasing pressure from Yavi Sierra, and right now it definitely is the boxing gloves going on between these drivers. And, well, Weston being very patient here, and this is what we love to see from the number 98 driver, is the fact he's really thinking about this as Clark looks up the inside there on Sparrow. He's absolutely chomping at the bit, is Samuel Clark. He wants it back, but the Dexterous Motorsports driver right now, I don't think has got enough to get it back, albeit as they roar the way past us. You can see the queue of cars that's now forming behind as that runs all the way back to Stephen Donnelly in 18th place. They are all getting into this long pack together, and well, that's a side of how much fighting is going on and how much time it's costing them. But the outcome so far, at least, as we get towards the midway point, is the 193 of JST Motorsports. Joe Sparrow has moved into third place in Premier, up to 12th as well, and Samuel Clark's now got to try and find a way to make the counter-attack. And it's more woe here for Dexterous Motorsports because Mikey Storey, as he heads through turn number 2 on lap 16, is under pressure for the pro lead versus Christian Furs, who's right there on the back of him. And Simon Anthony, Chris Halsoy and Christian Baltret are all queued up behind. So this is really building up at this point. And I do wonder just how pit stops are going to change things. Now, if you're sat there wondering why none of these guys pitting, because surely somebody can gain in the pit stops, look at the track map and you'll understand why. If any of this pro group come into the pits, they are likely to come out into that primarily Premier and Evo pack further down the road. Nobody wants to be caught up in that traffic because what it will do, it will cost them time rather than gain them time. If they could come out and clear track, I can assure you, you would have multiple drivers coming in right now, potentially to go for the undercut. They'd have a longer second stint, but it would be worth it for the track position they potentially gain. But nobody's flinching at the moment, simply because of the fact there is too much of a risk to be caught up in the traffic jam further down the road. And that's not to be rude about drivers further back, it is just how closely packed they are in together. And that is why this race right now is really building up to something interesting strategy-wise, as well as what is on track-wise, as Jordan Jones rejoins the track. He's had a spin at Split-Scale hairpin. Has that been aided by somebody or his own volition? Well, we don't know, but how we can know is we take a replay, as that is going to be Rob Windsor going up the inside him. So Jones is dropping all the way down to 26th place. That's going to be frustrating there, because if I know Jordan well, the DWR with Supercoach Setups driver has been improving very much this season so far. Indeed, he's been on the grid for a couple of seasons. He's been absolutely brilliant in the UK SimRacing series. He's been learning, he's been getting quicker, and right now we don't normally see him make a spin, but let's find out what exactly happened then for the number 38, and here we go. So this was at the Split-Scale hairpin, chasing at the time after Matt Hoyland, tried to get the power down, and as he did so, it was his own volition, got a little bit too loud with the loud pedal, and as a result, car went spinning to the grass, thankfully not to the barrier. And for Jordan Jones, it's a simple mistake, but one that he'll be absolutely fuming at himself for as we come back to your live racing. As we do, well, time continues to trickle away, and as it does, strategy becomes the bigger and bigger question of the day. But nobody at the moment, at least, willed into that pit lane. Jack Barker, in fact, has come into the pits, which should be pointed out, so he has made his pit stop, so he's decided to invest, but he was further down the order to begin with. He was your 7th place pro driver, so therefore, not being rude about him, he's not one of the big belligerents who we're thinking about, who needs to pit at some point to try and find a way to break the deadlock in either the leading pro pack or the leading Premier pack. That is the big question mark that we're waiting to see who can find an answer to it. But right now, Storey, Furs, Anthony, Maltret, Halsoy and Cox, they are your top 6 of pro, and they are all together, albeit Peter Cox, in fact, is falling backwards a little bit off of them, and into the pits. Who was that who's just come into the pits? We did see somebody make the way in, unless I'm going completely blind. No, I'm not. It's Christian Furs. He makes his way into the pit lane, and as he does, well, right now, the Panda Split Motorsports driver decides, right, I'm going to take the gamble. If nobody else is coming in, I might as well go for something different here, because I've got a lot to lose, but I've also got even more to gain. Well, there he is being serviced. Meanwhile, Mikey Storey carries on. Breathing room acquired now. 1.3 seconds to St. Anthony, but it will only be brief as they make the way on through. Now, we should point out that despite the instance we saw at the start of the race, we have had 2 retirements in this race in the form of Darren Sharples and Wayne Douglas, but Luke Sherlock is still running out there, as is Ashley Coutland, with both drivers having significant damage to their cars. Sherlock is a lap down, but glad to see him out there giving it his all still, and hopefully he can have a much better day next time out, because he has had, if somebody said, who can you give all the bad luck to for this season, I think Luke Sherlock would be that driver, and somebody's decided to give him a double dose of all that bad luck, and whoever decided to do that, well, shame on you, because Luke doesn't deserve that, I can tell you that, because he is a very positive character down in the paddock and on the circuit, and right now I'm amazed how he's still got a smile in the Pennzoil livery machine, and there you can see him in the car right now. He is a lap down, 10th place in Premier class, but he's still keeping the positives about him. But whilst he makes his way onwards, Christian Furs in the pit lane, still being serviced at the moment, and Fine Fish is being serviced. Let me just double check. I do not believe we're expecting any sort of penalty for Furs. No, it's for Helder Gonzalez only, and Gonzalez not here today, I believe. So unless, we didn't see the car go up and Jax, unless Furs have picked up a stop and hold penalty for what has been track limits or a slowdown that he didn't serve. Well, Furs has been in. He has been static for the best part of 1 minute and 5 seconds. If they have put tyres on that car and also the full fuel tank by accident, then Christian Furs' race has suddenly gone from good to great to disaster in the space of a pit stop. And that is a surprise and not a welcome one to be certain. As he makes his way onwards, we do say hello, in fact, to the man we're just talking about, of Luke Sherlock, and hope you're doing it well, my friend, and good to see you in there. And well, we can see Sam Clark saying that with regards to the Premier battle between himself and Joe Sparrow, and Yovi Sierra and Thomas Weston getting involved, this one I can only describe as an absolute brawl of a race, and well, I think that's quite adequately put there, to be fair. And meanwhile, whilst we've got a little bit less excitement in the pro field, we've got a lot of excitement in the rear of the picture. That is Rob Windsor picking up all the pieces, coming out the final corner, minus now the bonnet of that McLaren. I don't know where it's gone. We'll try and get a replay of what happened there shortly. But from him, we come back to what we were going to talk about, which was Thomas Weston, firstly, and Stephen Donnelly changing places. It's going to be Donnelly up the inside here. Weston doesn't fight it. And what was also building is the fact that Richard Jones is chasing after James Connolly. And Connolly under increasing pressure here for 7th place in the Premier class. We have got some building battles further down in Premier right now. Those pit stops definitely starting to take effect. Where will everybody fit into the long order? We will see. The highest place stopper so far is Ashley Coutland, who did make that pit stop for the damage picked up at the start of the race. We believe he's got another pit stop to go, which will be his mandated fuel stop. So from him, it would be none other than Jack Barker down in 24th place, who currently is your highest place driver who has served his mandatory pit stop over the race distance, as we're to understand it. As he makes his way onwards, Christian Maltrek has decided to take himself out of the sequence for Mimica MA70 Esports. And well, he parks up there and he's going to be serviced. So that will release Krista Halsoy and Peter Cox onwards. Slight Ansley will be grateful for the breather. Mikey Storey will now know that the strategy is on the clock and we only have 29 minutes left in this race. So if drivers have not served pit stops, they will need to start serving pit stops soon, as otherwise those fuel tanks are going to look increasingly dry. Well, that is not going to be good news if they end up completely running out, because if they don't have an infinite fuel in these cars, they will need to make their way into the pits. Otherwise, they'll find themselves parked up on circuit, and they will be taking the long trip home from what will be the car to the marshal's post, and then all the way back to the pits. So the team will be saying to him, why didn't you come in and listen? But meanwhile, Krista Halsoy, he's listening right now to the flow of the race. And well, I get the feeling his gut says that he's enjoying it so far, running in around about 3rd on the overall race, but within the top 5 definitely on strategy here in the pro class. But how could he get onto that podium? That is the question that he needs to find an answer to. We're down towards turn number 12. They come once again, and as they do, we'll further back. We've got Matt Hoyland fighting here with Nathan Anstis. These two, they've both got cars that are very fresh, full of fuel, and Hoyland goes up the inside of Anstis, goes very deep at turn number 2. In fact, goes so deep there, I thought he was going to go to the grass or go around, but Hoyland does neither. And now as we ride aboard and look back from the rear of this leading Ford Mustang in this battle, well, Anstis gets closer and closer and a little bit closer, and now looks to the inside. Here will be a battle under the brakes. Anstis there should have the advantage braking wise. Inside line is a Spitzkehrer, but he's going to give space there, and that is where Hoyland now can get the blast out the corner. This Mustang's so quick on the accelerator as they roar the way up towards turn number 8. So Hoyland will go outside to inside here through 7, and now as they get ready to go battling on the brakes, well, we can see that Nathan Anstis doesn't have a response, and Matt Hoyland is able to retain the position for Vulcan and Fasters by Gloucester Racing, but not about a big slide there on the rear end. My good lord, that is the best part of 530 horsepower just sliding loose on that rear axle. And well, Matt Hoyland right now absolutely dancing that American pony around the corners. And well, Nathan Anstis, who a much more refined British McLaren, where you think to yourself right now, I'm going to have to get a little bit loose if I want to try and find a way to beat this man. But whilst that's happening, leaving the pit lane there was Casper Brotner being passed by Christian Maltrek. And Maltrek, has he jumped anybody as a result of the pit stops? Not so far. He has returned ahead of Casper Brotner, who was right there with him. So this is a sign that it's actually looking quite close between them. And Maltrek could really fit in amongst Storey, Ansley, Halsoy and Cox once they do serve their pit stops. Elite leaders, they have pitted, Simnor and Nathan, and it is pretty much rinse and repeat as it was before the pit stops. The gap before the pit stops was 2.5 seconds. after the pit stops, it is now 2.2 seconds. Joe Nathan has closed that gap down by half a second in the pits, and there is the Rage Against the Game esports driver there in quite a special livery today. I do love the reflected colours there of the car, and was he chased after Richard Simnor? Well, right now the Ferrari 296 looking quick, but what has he got to close Simnor down, because they have been exchanging lap times non-stop over the entirety of the distance? Well, hold the fort on that one, because into the pit lane there is your pit stand. You can't actually see them. It is Storey, Anstey, Halsoy, Cox, Louis Perre and Lever. Maltrek, where is he? Here he is, making his way up towards turn number 12. And as he makes way through the long curved left-hander, now into 13 and 14 here, he's about to complete his lap. But where does he come out in relation to everyone? Because Zilka goes on to another lap. He will lead a lap of this race, yet to pit. But Maltrek will be hoping he can get the jump. Storey is leaving the pit lane right now. And in fact, I think he is going to beat Christian Maltrek quite comfortably. So Anstey, where is he? Not sure. Peter Cox, meanwhile, we're certain of this. Cox has leapt up into second place. So has he? No, it's down to third, because here comes Christian Maltrek. So Maltrek has got the jump as a result of the pit stop, and Casper Brockner as well, so it's worked out the undercut for Christian Maltrek. Mikey Storey, however, has proved untouchable, and I get the feeling the Dexterous Motorsports driver was trying to fuel save as much as possible in that first stint to guarantee he'd come out ahead. Well, they've nailed the pit stop at Dexterous Motorsport, they've nailed the pit stop at Miracle MA70 Esports, and Peter Cox as well. He has gained 2 places in Pro ahead of his rivals as a result of what has been a very quick run to the pits. Albeit we have, I believe, had one of our other drivers dropped out. Krista Halsoy has been stuck there. He's been stuck in the pit lane for the best part of a whole minute, as was Christian Furs. Now, I wonder whether Tractix Racing have made the same mistake of Panda Spec Motorsports, which is they decided to change the tyres on these cars. And by tyres, I mean all 4, because they can change the tyres simultaneously with what is the fuel going in, and normally it would not cost that much time. We are just going to double check what's happened in pit control as to whether we do have any information to suggest why Halsoy and Furs have had such long pit stops. So bear with us, ladies and gentlemen. We are looking at, in the meantime, whilst all the races continue to go on, and we've got Louis Perre right now fighting hard to get past Peter Cox, very eager to make a quick impression. And in fact, what we can confirm is that we have, no, it's just pit stops there. There's no penalty or anything along those lines for either Furs or Halsoy. So therefore, I think it has just been a mistaken change of tyres for the team. And well, if so, that's going to cost them a huge amount of time. And that is definitely going to be gutting there for both drivers who are looking so impressive. And suddenly, that 5-way fight for the Pro win has devolved into a much more casual 3-way fight where the top 3 have spread out to a degree. But Louis Perre right now not holding anything back, as we have had Hendrik Zilka and Ashley Kootman come into the pit lane. Zilka leaves the pits there, and by going the longest of everybody by the best part of what was 22 laps, well, where's he come back out? He's come back out in 5th place in the Premier class, and he's right behind old rival from previous seasons, but now in 2 different classes, of Jack Barker. And Barker, in fact, through his strategy, has moved up to 4th place in the Pro class. That's been very well done. He would effectively be 6th if it were not for the strategic struggles of both Halsoy and also what was none other than Furs. But to be fair to Barker, he decided to go for the undercut, the earliest of the Pro drivers, and it has actually worked out for him, because he has put some daylight between himself and this man, Stephen Donnelly, and Matt Hoyland and Nathan Anstis are a bit further back now. So Barker, I think, picked it right and decided, I've got nothing to lose by going in to be the first one, given the fact there's a lot of clear tracks, so I might as well go for it. As, hold up a second, we've lost Ricardo Louis Perre. There he is, and as he comes back together, that has got very well coming out of turn number 10. The 1-2-1 is back pointing in the right direction, but something tells me it's not without the car coming undone. And let's find out what exactly happened for your Premier leader, who's relinquished that lead to Alan Lever. Here's the replay. So coming out of turn number 10, plenty of apex curve, a bit too much, bounces the car up. Oh my goodness! Hits the sausage curve on the exit, hits it square on, and the low ride height of that Aston Martin sends it all the way round to the barrier, rejoins, but then that was Alan Lever coming on through. So Alan Lever right now picking up the scraps of the lead of the Premier class, where Ricardo Louis Perre got it wrong, so that's a surprise. And the man who's definitely been very consistent so far this season of Louis Perre gives way to the even more consistent Alan Lever. Well, how about that, ladies and gentlemen? That's a change. Let's go back to your live racing. So as we come on back, well, Lever now will know he's still got some pressure on him, because Louis Perre is not going to just simply bow down and let that lead go. The gap then between them is 2.5 seconds. It's a damaged Aston Martin chasing down what is a clean Lamborghini. So on paper at least, you imagine that Lever, if he can keep it together, will naturally maintain the gap or open it up. How it depends on the pace that Luis Pereira leads his way onto each and every lap with. He may be able to equalise, he may be able to close it down. Because in terms of personal best over the race distance, Ricardo Luis Pereira at 37.07 and Lever at 37.45. So theory states that Luis Pereira is the faster of the two drivers when both cars are fully intact. But what can the Aston Martin driver do here in a car that's definitely wounded? We will see. Now, going further down the order, we've been talking a lot about the classes up the road, but let's not forget we have a fourth class here in the form of the Evos. And, well, Thomas Weston is the man running away with the Evo class lead at the moment, and indeed looking to make it back-to-back victories today, and that will be an absolutely huge feeling for the number 98 driver. But meanwhile, the fight for second is brewing, because Jordan Jones, we had a spin earlier on when he was looking quite comfortable. Joseph Preston is really the beneficiary of that. He has closed up massively over the race distance. And the JSD Motorsports driver who started 6th for the Evo class, well, right now he's on course for what would be another podium. In fact, I think, unless I'm mistaken, this would be his... Well, in fact, yes, it would be back-to-back third places here. But something tells me right now, with the fact he's looking at Jordan's car quite closely, he fancies his chances of finishing second here today. So going one step up the podium and one day potentially chasing down the win as he hustles this Porsche 902 from quarter to quarter here. Preston is leaving nothing on the table as there Jones goes a bit wide. He'll get away with it that time, but he can't keep doing that over the distance. But Preston right now keeping it within track limits, even if he's having to shake the car around. And well, on to another lap they go. And Preston right now definitely, I think, on the attack. Knows he has got the pace, but he's just got to keep it consistent. He might be able to reel Jones in. But that Aston Martin, when we do get to these medium speed corners followed up by straights, that's where the Aston Martin is stronger. It is able to carry similar speed to the Porsche through the medium speed sweepers, but it's also got better acceleration in the middle gears, and that is the delta. The Porsche, meanwhile, better on the brakes, better in the low speed corners with rotation, but it lacks the top end. And well, as he roars his way down towards turn number 6, gap opens up to 7/10 an hour on the straight. But under braking here, you'll see it comes down very quickly indeed, because Press is able to close up more. It's just beyond the natural concertina, and well, it's rinse and repeat as they head on to the second half of the lap. As these drivers do, well, from them, we make our way back to Samuel Clark, who still finds himself right now having to play rear guard action in third place in the Premier class. He has been able to get back ahead of Joe Sparrow as a result of the pit stops. So Sparrow there with a significantly longer stop by comparison, by the best part of 3 seconds, has fallen behind. And also Yavi Sierra has been able to get between the two of them. That's the elite driver there in the lime green Mercedes AMG Evo. And we see Jack Barker there as well. Now, if you're Joe Sparrow at this point, you do not want the Made for Racing Lamborghini between you and the cars in front unless you have the confidence that it's going to be able to catch the ones in front. The reason being, of course, because we know that Joe does have the faster pace compared to Clark over the distance. However, the problem is, as soon as he lets the driver from another class get in front, he's then at the helm of that class's driver, having the pace to carve their way through, which if Barker was all over the back or Sparrow like a bad rash, you would imagine he would probably oblige. However, he's not, and that is where it becomes a much more difficult matter. You have to try and politically manage this with the driver behind, to essentially try and send them the message, which is, look, you haven't got a fellow class driver in front of you by a significant margin, so therefore why try to fight past me when I can just pull you along and I have got someone I'm fighting with. Barker, to be fair, he has not got a silly head on him. He's a very intelligent driver, and therefore, as he roars his way through turn number 8, he'll be thinking to himself, you know what, I may as well stay with this unless I can clearly get ahead, and it's obvious that I have got a lot more pace. So that's what he's going to be doing in that Lamborghini. He's going to be sizing it up and thinking, when can he go for a move if he dares to even to do so. He does have the pressure of Stephen Donnelly 2 seconds behind, so that will be a bit of a push factor here, particularly if Donnelly does get within a second. But the gap between them, of course, is populated by Hendrik Zilka's Mercedes. So it is all right now an intermediate classes. Oh, goodness me, Barker gets very close there under braking in towards turn number 15. I think that's differences of lines and approaches. And I think being caught out a little bit by Sparrow, braking much earlier in that Aston Martin. And will Barker able to take the evasive action needed, which was to let the car go deep under braking. But that could have worked out very differently there. And Samuel Clark, meanwhile, and a pull run through turn number 1. Here comes the Yavi Sierra up the inside. So this is where Sparrow's going to be looking to close up. In they go. And Clark cuts off the nose there of Sierra. Says to him, no, you don't. And we'll see how he's going to be a little bit annoyed at that one. Clark kept that just about fair and square, right on the limit to be fair. But that goes to show you just how much Clark wants this track position for 9th place overall, because he finds it is the gateway to staying ahead of Joe Sparrow. And there goes Sierra looking one way and then the other, and Clark right now defending well, absolutely pushing it to the limit here. That's what you've got to do, to be fair, if you want to continue to lead the championship in the Premier class. And I think he'll want to use Sierra as his blocking force all the way through. I don't think he wants Sparrow directly behind him. I think he'll be worried that if Sparrow will take that place back quite quickly. And in fact, as we look at the YouTube chat there, he pretty much validates what we stated. So Samuel Clark right now giving us the insights there as he makes his way on through. And as he does, that's absolutely brilliant. Appreciate it, Sam. And well, these drivers right now all queued up behind one man who just wants to maintain the status quo at the very top of the Premier class. And well, Ricardo Luis Pereira and Alan Lever, they will close up to him in the championship standings, but they are not his main concern at this time. So the main concern in the Premier standings for him will be none other than Hendrik Zilka, who at this point is going to be losing points, whereas Ricardo Luis Pereira will move to second in the championship after today, and Clark will continue to hold that lead going into our next round. But as they're coming out, well, we've still got 15 minutes left on the clock. This is our closest battle on circuit at the moment, so we do stay with it. As we have had some changes further down the order, we have had Paul Maffey drop a lap down, and Luke Sherlock has been able to take overall 30th place off of him, as they do head on through. And Edward Barry is continuing to be on a recovery drive, 5th of your Evo drives after a frustrating start to race, and that is a big impact in the championship, because remember, Berry is your championship leader after 4 rounds, and well, right now this 5th place will still get some good points, but you'll know that his advantage is being slashed. And the one danger man who has really been the danger all season, but until his win last time out we haven't really seen him announce himself on the stage, is the man in front of him on a lap and also on circuit. That is Thomas Weston, who with back-to-back wins is going to very quickly start to close down the gap to Berry at the top of Evo, and we could really have an Evo championship on our hands when we do come back in a week's time for plenty more racing in the second half of the season. Further up the order in the Evo class, we do see Jordan Jones and Joseph Preston still together, and Preston back there again, looking to the inside. He knows not to go for it from too far back. The brakes on that Porsche are strong, but they're not that strong, and therefore he does just tuck back in behind right now. Rides the sausage curb on out there, Cog grounds out, and remember the ride heights of these GT3 cars, they can be as low depending on the circuit as in the region of around 55mm if my memory serves me correctly. In those sausage curbs, they are high, and if the car hits them head on, it can actually ground the car out, which is what we saw happen for Ricardo Luis Pereira coming out of turn number 10, where he hit the exit sausage curb, which you can see that what is the browny orange strip on the right hand side of your picture. He hit it head on and it ground the front splitter out on the car, and that's why we saw the sudden knee-jerk reaction of the car all over the road. But as we do see our battle for second place in the Evo class not changing, stays exactly as it is, well, we do have here a change of position. Stephen Donnelly gets ahead of Hendrik Zilka, so does take that place as we look at the overall standings, and moves up to 13th place, does Donnelly. His next target will be Jack Barker, and he'll fancy his chances now trying to take 4th place in the Pro class. But meanwhile, Samuel Clark back under pressure again from Yavi Sierra. Sierra makes him sit in the middle of the road, looking around the outside. Sierra does not have the confidence to try and go to the inside here. Front engine rear wheel driving that Mercedes, understandable. But meanwhile, Clark just simply makes the mistake of going out too deep. And now Sparrow's going to get close to the back of him here as they roar the way towards turn number 8. But it really is a game right now of can Clark keep the barrier in place, or can Sparrow knock down the wall? If he can, and I think he will be now eager to, because I think he can see the game is afoot here with 12.5 minutes to go, then we could have a very ferocious fight for 3rd place in Premier on our hands. If not, it may sit in this formation all the way to the end, but they'll keep us guessing. Also, another thing to guess, Cy Anthony, who came into the pits, and well, he made his way and had an extended pit stop, much like Halsoy and Furs. So he was looking for second place in the Pro class. We're wondering where he'd gone, and well, he's fallen all the way back here to be behind Ashley Coupland when all was said and done. So therefore, for Cy Anthony, something went wrong, and I suspect it may be the same error as what the team at Track6 Racing and the team at Panaspec did. SimRacing opted to give Anthony 4 new tyres rather than just 1 or 2. And well, that is definitely a bit of a lesson to learn from the team there, as he now comes around in the 227. as he makes way out of 15 and 16. Goodwin is not going to be an easy driver to pass here. That Ford Mustang looking very quick. And, well, Krista Halsoy on the back of Ross Young. And Young definitely getting a bit of baptism by fire here on his debut race. In the fact that he is finding right now, he is surrounded by drivers in the class above him. And they are all itching to make up some overall places where they can. Coming down towards another lap then, we look from them back to the leader of your Premier class. There is Anne Lever, and well, Ricardo Luis Pereira still 2.7 seconds behind. Lap deltas right now, 2 tenths in the favour of Luis Pereira on the last lap. In fact, can we get an idea of the lap time as it's evolved over the last couple? I think the answer is yes, we can. And here are your lap time deltas. And what you can see is that Luis Pereira has been closing little by little, lap after lap. He is bringing that gap down, and therefore I think he'll be fancying his chances that he can get within attacking distance before this race is said and done. But we will see. Alan Lever might right now be holding on, and well, we do have confirmation there from Budget Racing Noob in the YouTube chat. There was a black flag at the pits for Sight Anthony, and it could, to be fair, be a black flag for speed in the pit lane for Chris Halsoy and Christian Furs. Unfortunately, we don't have that information available to us, I don't think. But if we can get that for any driver, we will where we can. But thank you for confirming their good sir in the YouTube chat. But as we then come back to the clock, Sierra Sparrow battle with Barker and Stephen Donnelly getting into the queue, as do Zilka and Hoyland. Well, there Sierra taking a little bit of a look again. No way in. Matt Hoyland, meanwhile, he started to get a little bit antsy as we ride aboard the 223. Good run through turn number 1. Surely this has got to be a move versus Hendrik Zilka. Yes, it is. Zilka lifts off the throttle there, in fact, and lets it go. He knows there's no point fighting with a pro driver. He might as well tuck him behind. So Hoyland will now go hunting after Stephen Donnelly. It's going to be 2 Ford Mustangs breathing down the neck of a Lamborghini Huracan. And, well, will it be a good time for Jack Barker, or will it be a race of nightmares from this point onwards? Knowing that he's got double the effort he's got to put in all the way to the end. Well, hopefully he's going to be the one to be able to tell us that as they all charge away and around. And as they do, well, even more to come in this race, no doubt about it. And in fact, it was a black flag for Sight Anthony in the pit lane. In fact, he's had to make 2 pits. He's had to make what is an extended visit to the pit lane, as meanwhile we make an extended visit to Krista Halsoy versus Ross Young. That's going to be Halsoy up the inside here in towards turn number 6. On to the brakes he goes. Place taken there. Meanwhile, Jack Barker, hold up a second, he's pointed the wrong direction. That is at turn number 8 into 9-10. Barker's got it around, and meanwhile, well, Yavi Sierra and Joe Sparrow almost changed places, but not quite. So in the end, Barker has lost out massively, but how exactly did he lose out? Well, here's a replay to explain. So this was Jack Barker having it all go wrong at turn 7 into 8. In fact, that was Sparrow behind there, so there's a bit more to this than meets the eye. Then Barker under brake, he goes on in. And I think there's a tiny tap there from Sparrow on the back of him. Can we get a replay of how they changed places in the first place? Yes, we can. So under braking here, Sparrow went up the inside, tried to go for the move on Sierra, couldn't quite find it. A bit of door bashing there, or wheel bashing, and Barker made his way through. Now, they made the way then up towards turns 7 and 8. Well, can we get a better angle of what happened here? We've got a slightly different camera angle. I don't know if it's going to tell us the whole story, or is it? Under braking, it looked as though there might have been a bit of a tap there from Sparrow on the rear left quarter of Barker, and that's what sent him around. I think Sparrow at this point, understandably, frustrated at the fact he wasn't able to pass Sierra, but in turn, I think, finding that frustration, being ejected out onto the made-for-racing Lamborghini. Don't think there was any malice meant, but Sparrow looked back at that one afterwards and then think to himself, could we perhaps done that a little bit better based on what we're sitting on the cameras? But of course, it could be a very different story for all the cameras that are available to our drivers and our stewards after the race. So back to the race and we come, and as we do, we come back in good time, and Sparrow goes on the round. We literally come back, and that is Joe Sparrow going very sideways there, coming out of turn number 8, the same place where it all went wrong for Jack Barker any moments ago, and Sparrow's gone very sideways. Unfortunately, we're not going to quite get a replay of that. We haven't quite got the footage for it, but Sparrow and Barker find themselves back together, and Sparrow's pursuit of Samuel Clark has all come to naught right at the end of it. He huffed, he puffed, but in the end, it went the way, it would seem, of Samuel Clark, albeit Clark still got to hold on for another 7 minutes here. And I wonder just how long he can hold on for the Dexterous Motorsports driver, because he has got a lot of pressure from Javi Sierra. But surely right now, if you're Samuel Clark, you've got to be thinking to yourself, you don't need to stay ahead of these guys anymore. Matt Hoyland's all over the back of Stephen Donnelly, and Hoyland flashing his lights, I think, trying to say to Stephen Donnelly, look, I'm coming. And, well, we will see what will come from Hoyland as he gets ready to look up the inside there. I think he was hoping that perhaps he could get Donnelly to outbrake himself, but then Donnelly outextends himself there from 2 into 3. We'll go defensive now. It'll be the battle of the V8s all the way down towards turn number 6. It's going to be 5 litre V8 versus 5 litre V8 all the way on through. And, well, right now, Hoyland is going to be on that inside down towards the hairpin. Will he be able to get the move done under braking? Well, Donny's not going to give it up without a fight. And Donnelly does have the advantage of an outside line, but he doesn't get it around. He snaps it in first gear there, does Donnelly. He tries to get the power down and loads up the preload differential, but Hoyland there, much smoother exit line, is able to take the place. Lovely move then from the 223 driver and into fourth place. He's on a great recovery drive as Matt Hoyland. As Stephen Donnelly gets very close on the break in there. Right now, Donnelly, he's not giving this up. The GT3 Motorsports driver fancies his chances for a brief moment at least, but right now, well, if he's going to get any closer at this point, he's really going to have to go late on the braking, because that gap has suddenly opened up to the best part of half a second as they come through turn number 11. And I think Stephen Donnelly tried to go for the counter-attack. It hasn't worked out, and now he will be at the mercy of Hoyland making a mistake, or the GT3 Motorsports Mustang Sonny starts to come on strong. Now going through towards the end of this lap, we go on to what will be lap number 34 for these drivers. Our leaders already a third of the way into that lap. And, well, we haven't got too many more to go. Most likely a 34th lap plus another 3. And therefore we'll get 37 laps when all is said and done for our leaders. But right now, all the big question marks with regards to the podiums in our classes have mostly been settled. The Jones versus Preston battle for second and third in Evo. Well, here it is. Jones right now has reopened that gap to 1.5 seconds. He does seem to be thinking that he's in control of this. However, Preston is not giving up. And Jones to Preston on the previous lap was 4/10 of a second faster. This time around, it was a 38.5 for Jones. For Preston, a 39.5. So a whole second there being the delta. So Jones has been able to naturally open that gap up on one lap. Well, will it come back the other way in due course? Well, we will see. As we do see there, Javi Sierra finally being rewarded for his perseverance. He's been able to get past Samuel Clark, and now Clark is all over the back of the Mercedes man as they head through 7 in towards 8. And Clark here pulls the racer line immediately. Is that to go around the outside? Yes, it is. So Samuel Clark right now still enjoying some battling, even though he doesn't need to anymore. But I think he's got the bit between his teeth, and he wants to try and hold on as long as he can. But out as they come, we say hello there to Sir Bottlejob, talking a little bit about his contact with Joe Spout early on by looks of things. We also do say hello there to Natalia Martin. And, well, as our drivers come in towards turn number 12, right now does seem as though Sarah has finally cleared Clark. And now Hoyland and Stephen Donnelly will be figured out how do they clear the Dexterous Motorsports McLaren. And, well, the short answer is with sheer will, because Samuel Clark here, I don't think he's going to make it easy, because he naturally does not want to let this man close up. And Hendrik Zilka, if Zilka was to finish ahead of Clark, that championship lead would be chiselled away just that little bit more. But time is of the essence. 3 laps left, and Hendrik Zilka right now knows his target man's just a little bit further up the road, but what's he got to be able to close him down? That is what we're waiting to get an answer for. And right now, he doesn't seem to have an answer, as we do look at the class standings there. But who does seem to have an answer to a situation is Joseph Preston, who has caught back up to Jordan Jones. Gap now back down to 0.8 of a second as they go on to lap 35 of their own. And Preston and Jones, they've definitely been this good little battle between them. They haven't been fighting too much on the circuit today, but what they have been doing is exchanging lap times non-stop. And, well, Thomas Weston dominating the way in Evo class by 12.2 seconds at the moment. Understandably, their fight for second and third really has been one of the highlights of Evo, beyond Weston making it back-to-back victories, which, to be fair, he absolutely deserves, given the fact he's not had too much luck so far this season. And suddenly, all that luck now is starting to come on around for him. But as we head towards the closing stage of this race, let's talk a little bit about your leaders. Here's Richard Simnor for DCW Racing, and in control is the number 321 machine, because Joe Nathan there, he is 4.5 seconds back, and today we have seen Nathan be on the back foot. Normally, we've seen it the other way around. It's been Richard Simnor who's not quite had the pace over the distance, and the strategy's not been obliging. Or Joe Nathan today, the strategy definitely was obliging. However, the pace has been in the hands of that Ford Mustang. And different circuits, different weeks, it does mean the balance of performance will ebb and sway. And today has been a circuit that has favoured the Ford. But next time out, of course, it could see parity restored, or it could swing the other way towards the Ferrari. And I think Simnor will be hopeful that this is the start of what would be at least a small run of wins to really level the playing field between the two of them, given the fact they really have been the two stars right at the front. Mikey Storey, well, he currently sits in third overall, but is leader of Pro, with Christian Maltrek continuing to chase him down. And it's the battle of the BMWs, and there you see Maltrek just behind. Over the most recent laps, Maltrek and Storey have been equal, but Maltrek was closing him down, and then I get the feeling that over the last couple of laps, Storey has had to respond. He's been saving the tyre life up enough to give himself the opportunity to then be able to pump the laps in to make sure the Miraca MA70 car doesn't get any closer, although Maltrek is really frying the car at the circuit right now. And speaking of frying things in here, well, here comes Stephen Donnelly frying his chips where they may, and well, Matt Hoyland goes defensive there for fourth place in Pro. He holds on to it for now, but will there be an opportunity? And the answer is no. Stephen Donnelly will have one more chance of this. The next lap, it will be the final lap of racing today. We are going to get a grand total of 37 laps in here, and well, right now it is all coming towards a close. And can Donnelly find a way to get through, or will he find himself just sitting behind Hoyland for one last tour of the German circuit? Well, that's what we are about to find out, because they head on to their final lap. Thomas Weston, meanwhile, a bit further back, he's in comfortable control of Evo, and well, he will be finishing on that lead lap like so many today, and well, he'll want to just now get this home, as Jordan Jones is still being chased by Joseph Preston. Preston is there or thereabouts, but not quite close enough still to look for a move. But can he get Jones to make a mistake of his own volition? Can he get close enough right at the end here to try and find a way to make it onto that second step for the first time this season, rather than make it back-to-back third places? Well, out they come from Sud Curve. Both drivers, they were running out wide, using any off-tracks they've got available to them now to open up the corners, albeit they've thrown everything at this one. They have one more chance. Scianti's in the pit lane, and was he comes into the pits for what I believe might be a penalty of some description, or underfueling of the car. In fact, it is underfueling, I believe. Well, meanwhile, here comes the man who has absolutely been in control today. It hasn't worked out in the first couple of rounds. It's gone the other way. But here in Germany, DCW Racing are on top, and it is going to be Richard Simnor who takes his first win of the season overall and an elite class, ahead of Joe Nathan, who has a spin out the final quarter, but he does bring it back together, and he will take second place at the finish line there. But for the Rage Against the Game esports driver, it's not gone the way he's wanted it today. Mikey Storey will take the win once again in the Pro class, just ahead of Christian Maltrek, who takes his best performance of the season. It will then be Joe Nathan who finishes a bit further back, in fact. Joe Nathan being demoted down the order. I think that's a glitch, ladies and gentlemen, so don't quote me on that unless there's something we don't know about. Casper Brotner is being promoted. A number of drivers being promoted ahead of Joe Nathan, but Brotner will take home what will be fifth on the road, ahead of Alan Lever, who comes on home and just behind Peter Cox to take the Premier win. Well done to Alan Lever for doing so. An absolutely superb drive, with Ricardo Luis Pereira finishing in second of the Premier drivers, and an absolutely huge effort from him. Yavi Sierra will take it home ninth place ahead of Samuel Clark, who does hold on to the final spot of the Premier podium. And then here, ladies and gentlemen, to complete your run of winners, it is back-to-back victories in Evo for Thomas Weston in a brilliant conclusion to his race. What about Jordan Jones versus Joseph Preston? Well, it's going to be a run to the line, but it will be runner-up in Evo going the way of Jordan Jones, ahead of Joseph Preston right at the finish. And, well, what an attempt there for Joseph Preston, but it wasn't enough, and Jordan Jones will take that. And we have just had information to say that Joe Nathan picked up a black flag with that spin right at the end, and that's why he's been demoted down the order. So we'll get you a full update on where they all finish shortly, as we do see the last lead lap finisher there of Rob Windsor take 24th place, or what for him in the Premier class is 7th place. And, well, we've also just had Luke Sherlock finish the race in the Pennzoil privateer machine. He's got to have a better day, surely. But to be fair, if anybody is embodying the spirit of league racing right now, it is this man in the 119, who never gives up, no matter how bad a day he has at the office. But with that, ladies and gentlemen, as Weston does some donuts to celebrate bringing on home another win, it means so much to him. You can tell he's absolutely enjoyed himself. Well, let's take a look at those race results subject to Eddie Stewart's inquiries. And indeed, Richard Simnor coming on down here as he sees us towards those results. And the DCW Racing drive today. Well, Joe Nathan has been the man to beat in Elite all season. And Richard Simnor has finally beaten him at his game of 60 minutes, strategy and pace. And today, the Ford Mustang from DCW Racing has found a way to be ahead of the Flying Ferrari. But into the pits he comes, to the scenic view we go, and with that, let's take a look at those race results subject to Eddie Stewart's inquiries, and here they are. So started, of course, with your overall finishing positions, and we can see there that it was a post-race penalty applied to Joe Nathan, a black flag given to him for reaching the instant limit on the final corner with that spin, and therefore he has been demoted all the way down from that second place finish. Richard Simnor then, well, he stays as is. He is your overall and elite winner today for DCW Racing, with then Mikey Storey being promoted to second place overall, and therefore it's an overall podium and the pro win for Mikey Storey for Dexterous Motorsports, and that is going to feel very special, because what it means is now after 5 rounds, it's 3 wins in 5 races and a second and a non-podium to boot, and Mikey Storey definitely the favourite in pro at the midway point. Christian Maltrek, he was the runner-up there and looked very strong in the second stint for Miraca MA70 Esports, but it wasn't quite enough in the end, and he had to settle for second place in pro, but third on the overall podium. That's no mean feat, and Casper Brott there, promoted to second place elite with that 4th place finish. He'll be smiling at that one for old dudes in cars. Peter Cox, he completed the pro podium there in 5th place for Slow and Steady Racing. Indeed, that was his approach today, and strategy worked out massively for the Mercedes driver, ahead of Alan Lever, who is your premier winner for UKSimRacing Mansell. A fantastic effort there from Lever, and right now definitely back to his best, ahead of Ricardo Luis Pereira and the SimRacing International Privateers of the Caribbean driver. Definitely has got to be one of the stars of the show today with that second place in Premier Class, and had to dig deep very much for it, even if it meant grounding the car out on a surface curve at one point. Yavi Sierra, well, he'll take the final spot on the elite podium for the privateer. Well done to him in a very controlled race, albeit had to keep it controlled around Premier and Pro drivers, one of which he fought the majority of the race with was Samuel Clark. 3rd place on the Premier podium, 9th on the road. The Dexterous Motorsports driver there deserving that podium, given the fact he had to really hold off the attacks from Joe Svara and also Hendrik Zilker. But before we get to them, it was Joe Nathan, who finished second on the road, but demoted all the way down to 10th place then. You've got to feel for the Rage Against the Game esports driver. That's going to be gutting, and that will give Richard Simnor the opportunity to really take the fight to him now going into the second half of the season. With best of the rest of the length going to Hendrik Zilker for Old Dudes in Cars Blue, and it was Jack Barker, Joe Sparrow, Ashley Coupland and Nathan Anstis who rounded off your top 15. From the UKSimRacing Mansell Drive, we'll now come to the Evo podium finishers. Thomas Weston was in 19th, your Evo winner, the privateer. Back-to-back victories to the number 98 driver. Absolutely ecstatic about that. And outside the top 20, we did see that in 21st place, just behind Ross Young, it was Jordan Jones, your runner-up in Evo, who was chased relentlessly by his rival there of Joseph Preston. But in the end, the Darkwing Racing with SimCoach Setups driver was able to keep the JSD Motorsports car just at arm's length. We also saw finish on the lead lap, Stephen Donnelly and Rob Windsor, and there was a lap down for Cy Anthony, Simon Hartley, James Connolly, Edward Berry and Luke Sherlock, with Paul Maffey 2 laps down but still classified as a finisher, and we did see unfortunate early retirements for Richard Jones, Daryl Giacovelli, Darren Sharples and Wayne Douglas. So 34 starters, and in the end a grand total of 30 finishers, ladies and gentlemen. But how does it translate into class finishing positions? Well, as we can see, firstly, in the elite class, Richard Simnor, winner today for DCW Racing. It was much closer on the road, but after penalties, it was much further away, and he takes his first win of the season ahead of Casper Brotner, who takes his first podium of the season there for Old Dudes in Cars, and indeed an absolutely great effort there for Brotner, and finally landing a podium. The privateer, Aviavi Sierra, took 3rd place, that first podium of the season for him as well, ahead of Joe Nathan, who'll be gutted to miss out on the podium, and know he needs to bounce back next round for Rage Against the Game Esports, and Ashley Coupland on his debut, where it went very sideways into the opening corner after that contact between himself and Nathan. So the relentless racing driver there will know that it has been a bit of a baptism by fire, but surely next round it's going to be more straightforward. Coming on to the pro class, And as we can see here in Pro, well, it was the story of Mikey Storey for Dexterous Motorsports, who managed to lead the way after taking the lead early on. He was able to nab the lead, and well, from that point onwards, it was all about holding off the attacks of everybody. And well, most of the drivers inside the Pro class were close at one point, but he was the one who would finish on top. Christian Maltrek got very close right at the end for Miracle MA70 Esports, and he would argue if only there were a couple more laps, but unfortunately he had to take the 60 minutes of racing that he could get, and what he could get for it was second place. Peter Clocks, a slow and steady racing driver, taking third place there, a brilliant effort and just kept out of danger and trouble, ahead of Jack Barker for Made for Racing, who made his way back to fourth. We gutted to be just one place shy of the podium, but to be fair, given how his race started, I think he'll be very pleased to see where it's ended. Nathan Anstis took fifth place there for UKSimRacing and Mansfield, a bit of a quiet race for him, but 2 seconds ahead of Krista Halsoy for Track 6 Racing, who, like the man who finished behind him, Christian Furs, had an extended time in the pits there, and a strategic blunder costing both drivers an opportunity of a podium. Then we saw Matt Hoyland for Dexterous Motorsports finishing 8th in an absolutely bold race from him today, albeit the Dexterous Motorsports driver will know there's plenty more that needs to be done. Head of Stephen Donnelly was 9th for JST Motorsports, and then we had Cy Anti for UK SimRacing Price and Darren Sharples who round off the Pro class, with unfortunately Sharples having to take an early retirement. Behind the old Dudes in Cars Blue driver, we then come on to the Premier class, and as we can see here, it was Alan Lever who was the man who led the way today, albeit all the way over the race distance. He was never too far away from somebody trying to close him down, and well, for Alan Lever, he now makes it a second win of the season after his win in the season opener, and Ricardo Luis Pereira finishes behind the UK SimRacing Mansfield driver only by half a second, but the SRI Privateers the Kyabrean driver will know that second place will be worth a lot more in the bigger picture. Because in third was Samuel Clark, the championship leader, with Dexterous Motorsports, who had to fend off the attacks of everybody behind him today, and Hendrik Zilk was the man who was to finish first behind him in fourth place for Old Dudes in Cars Blue, ahead of Joe Sparrow for JSD Motorsports, but that late spin cost him the opportunity to finish third. Ross Young took 6th on his debut, a great effort there from the Scotsman, ahead of Rob Windsor, with the UK SimRacing Hill driver in 7th, just ahead of James Connolly, who was a lap down at the finish. It was also a lap down to Luke Sherlock, but was in it to win it all the way after the open lap altercation between himself and Ashley Coupland, with retirements of Richard Jones of Slow and Steady Racing, and also Wayne Douglas, your non-finisher. Then to the Evo class, last but by no means least, and here we did see Thomas Weston make it back-to-back victories by 12.1 seconds over Jordan Jones and the privateer right now. If he carries this on, then Edward Berry definitely will know that the threat is coming his way. But Jordan Jones enjoyed a brilliant battle over the distance with Joseph Preston to take second, with the JST Motorsports driver finishing only 7 tenths behind at the checker flag, and it was Simon Hartley, a lap down as classified for DWO SimCoach setups, who couldn't quite match the pace of Jones today, his teammate, but we happy with the top 5. Edward Berry also was a lap down there in a frustrating race for the UK SimRacing Hill driver, but a lap ahead of Paul Maffey for Phoenix Racing, and then Daryl Giacomelli, your sole retiree, 18 laps down there in 7th, but a non-finisher is classified. So that concludes our rundown of the results, ladies and gentlemen, subject to any stewards' inquiries. And with that, that concludes our racing here at the Hockenheimring in Germany, so it can only mean one thing. It is time for us to wrap up. Thank you very much for watching, and if you have enjoyed today's show, and perhaps you're sat there right now wanting to be on the grid at SimRacing International, or just wanting to become a part of the community, or everything in between, well, firstly, we do recommend that if you do want to get to know us more and know all the community, then do head to our official Discord, a link at the bottom of your screen. Indeed, you won't find a more friendly and welcoming community of sim racers around the world, from professional esports racers all the way through to rookies. There's a place for you on the grid here at SimRacing International, don't doubt it. And in terms of being on the grid, if you are interested, well, today you've been tuning into our Sunday GT3 Championship, as brought to you by the UK SimRacing community, but we do have plenty of GT3 racing at the community, including the Trophy.ai sponsored GT3 Championship in its 10th season on Thursday evenings as well. We also have the America's GT Challenge that runs on every alternate Sunday evening, and that is a blending of GTEs and GT3s in multi-class madness. And well, it sounds like madness, but it's absolutely brilliant on circuit, we can promise you that. For those who are looking for something a bit more casual, or don't want to pay to be on the grid, or just want to build up experience to being on the grid, well, we do have our free to join practice league, which runs on Tuesday evenings and Saturday mornings at 10 a.m. So there's something for everybody here at SimRacing International, and to become part of it, all you need to do is join the official Discord. But also feel free to join us in saying a big thank you to our league and series sponsors, who do include Trophy.ai, Carme, More Than Technology, SimCoach, where you can unlock your true potential as a sim racer, the GP2 Group, and also Motorsport UK's esports division, who have recognised us here at SimRacing International as a recommended community. We're very grateful for that recognition, and long may our relationship with Motorsports UK continue into the foreseeable future. But with that, ladies and gents, we turn our attentions to next time. And next time out, we make our way back to the United States of America. And it is the SimRacing International Raceway in the US state of Florida that will welcome our drivers to round 6 of 10. All the racing action may occur on what is Sunday, the 2nd of November 2025. Goodness me, Christmas is not too far away. But come join us as if it were live on Wednesday, the 5th of November 2025, where we come to ask ourselves the question, who is going to outlast the bumps and the ruggedness of the old concrete slabs of Sebring, and whose championship aspirations will take flight at the home of the former Hendricks Army Air Base? Well, for all that and more, do tune in next time. But until then, we've been SimRacing International. I've been your host and commentator, Paul Walsh, also known as TX1 or Britain the Spit, depending on what media you follow me on. And until next time, remember to stay safe, stay well, stay smiling, and much like our drivers, ladies and gentlemen, remember to stay on track. Good night.